Hi, so in this video I'm going to go over the basics of managerial accounting, and this is from chapter 1 in your textbook. And the first thing to go over is that managerial accounting is not quite financial accounting. And the reality is that most of the accounting that accountants do is managerial accounting. It's not financial accounting. So what is the difference between financial accounting, which you learned about in the last course, and managerial accounting, which you're learning about now? And in financial accounting, we're preparing financial statements that people are going to use to make financial decisions. In other words, someone reads the annual report and then they make a decision. Should I invest in this company or not? Should I loan this company money? Should I keep my stock in this company or sell it? Those types of decisions. In managerial accounting, the information is going to managers who are going to make business decisions about the company. The time focus is very different also, because in financial accounting, we're really focused on what happened last year or in the most recent quarter. And we hope that if we give investors this information, they'll make good decisions. With managerial accounting, what we're interested in is what's going to happen in the future. So we want to provide managers with information that they can use in order to make decisions about what to do in the future. So really, most accounting information is focused in the past, but in managerial accounting we're going to go a step past that. Sorry, it's a pun. A step past that, and we're going to create a budget and a forecast to try to predict what's going to happen in the future. We also have a conflict in financial accounting between verifiability and relevance. There's a very heavy emphasis in financial accounting on verifiability, that all the information that we're providing is highly reliable. It's verifiable in the sense that if two people did the same calculations, they would pretty much come up with the same answer. And managerial accounting is more interested in providing information that's relevant for decisions. And this means that in managerial accounting, oftentimes, you're much more free to make estimates and forecasts and predictions and things like that, which might not be so verifiable in that two people doing them will come up with two different answers, but they're more relevant because they help managers to make decisions. Also, timeliness. In financial accounting, we are concerned about timeliness, but it's much less important than precision. We got to get audited financial statements right, and we want to get them out within a reasonable amount of time. In managerial accounting, there's a very, very heavy emphasis on timeliness. Getting information to managers very quickly, because the sooner they have the information, the quicker that they can make important decisions. Another difference is in the subject. In financial accounting, we're looking at the whole company. We're going to present the results of the whole company so investors in the whole company can make a decision about whether or not to invest in the whole company. With managerial accounting, what we tend to do is we tend to cut the company down into pieces and report on each piece individually, because managers oftentimes may make decisions about the whole company, but most real decisions are focused on different divisions of a company. What would be an example of divisions? PepsiCo is a great example. PepsiCo has a soft drink division, which everybody's familiar with, called Pepsi. But Pepsi also has a division which is focused on health foods, and they make things like Quaker Oats oatmeal. So, for example, Quaker Oats could be a segment, or their entire health food division could be considered a segment that you would report on. The rules. We have very strict rules in financial accounting called GAAP, Generally Accepted Accounting Principles. There's also International Financial Reporting Standards if you're outside the United States, and these rules must be followed in a prescribed format. In managerial accounting, there are no rules. Well, there are some basic rules, but they're basically rules that everybody kind of agrees that this is the right way to do it. But there are not strict GAAP rules that are very exacting that you have to follow. Rather, managerial accounting rules give you some basic guidelines, and you can play with those or change them around as they fit your needs. Finally, financial accounting is required for external reporting. And if you're going to report to the bank, or more importantly, if your company is publicly traded, then you're going to report financial statements to the public and post them online where investors can find them. Managerial accounting is completely optional. Companies can do whatever they want, however they want to do it, depending on what they really need to meet their needs. So we're concerned about managers and how managers make decisions. So if you're not an accountant, that's good, because we're going to learn about how to use accounting information inside a company, how to use management accounting information, and it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be an accountant. And managers are concerned with what's called planning, controlling, and decision making. Let me explain what each of these are about. Planning is about establishing goals, specifying how you're going to achieve those goals, and oftentimes it's going to involve a budget. So we don't just go into the future blindly, but rather what we do is we budget how things are going to happen during the year. That budget will show what we expect sales to be, how much goods we need to produce in order to create those sales, how many people need to work in the factory, how many raw materials we need to purchase, and all of the other things. So companies really need to plan very carefully. If they don't plan carefully, then all sorts of weird things can go wrong. For example, they might not have enough goods to sell, and then they can't sell them. Or they might run out of cash. Or they might run out of raw materials, which means that they don't have enough goods to produce the goods, and then they can't produce what they need to sell. They might not have enough workers in the factory. They might have too much workers in the factory. They might produce too much goods. So planning is extremely important because it establishes how you're going to achieve your goals. And if you don't plan that carefully, then you can miss some important steps, which in the end are going to hurt you pretty bad. Controlling is kind of the complement to planning, because what controlling means is making sure that things happen the way they were supposed to be. So if you create a plan and then you throw it out, you just forget about it, then there's no point, right? So what you have to do is you have to create your plan and you have to really follow it. And as a manager, you have to make sure that it's being followed. So what you would do is you would say, okay, we're planning to buy 1 million units of raw materials that we need to make goods. Let's see how many we actually bought. Let's call up and see, okay, how much are you buying? So controlling means making sure that the plan is being followed. And it also means, after the end of the period, comparing your plan to the actual. Because that comparison really tells you how closely everyone is following your plan. Because if you're making a plan and no one's paying any attention, then there's really no point in having a plan at all. And decision making means looking at your alternatives and choosing among them. What products are you going to sell? Who are your customers? How are you going to produce those products? And all of those other things are an important part of decision making. So decision making is what managers do. And when I refer to managers, I don't even mean just managers in a management sense. I mean people in all kinds of different disciplines who are making decisions in companies. So what we're doing in this class is relevant to everybody. And it's not really focused on accountants as much as it's focused on people who make decisions. And people who are going into business are people who make decisions. So if you're a marketing major, part of planning would be how much should you budget for TV, print, advertising, how many salespeople do you need, things like that. Those types of questions would all rely on managerial accounting information. Controlling is looking at a budgeted price cut, for example. You cut your price. Did the number of units increase that you sell? Or did they stay the same? How did sales respond to your price cut? How much inventory do you have? Do you have enough inventory for the shopping season? Do you have too much or do you have too little? And some of the decisions you may make is to sell your services in a bundle, to bundle your services or sell them separately. Should you sell your products directly to customers or should you use a distributor? All sorts of decisions, and you really need managerial accounting to help you make those decisions, because the information itself is what management accounting is in the job of producing for you. Operations management, how many units should we plan to produce? How should we budget for utility expense? Controlling would be comparing your actual spending to the budget. So did you spend more or less than you expected for the numbers that you produced? Or you had a goal of reducing defective units. Did you achieve that goal or not? Some examples of decision making typical in operations management would be, should we buy a new piece of equipment or should we upgrade the existing machine? Should we redesign our manufacturing process to lower inventory levels? Things like that. So you would need managerial accounting, and we're going to talk about how to do that. You're going to need managerial accounting to make these kinds of decisions. Human resource management accounting is also very important, because management accounting will often tell you how many workers you need and how much money you have to spend to pay your employees. So how much should you spend for occupational safety? Should you spend money to recruit employees or not? And you would create a budget to set aside money to do these different things, and that budget is all about managerial accounting. Controlling, it would be making sure, again, remember what controlling is. Planning is making your plan. Controlling is making sure that you're following your plan. So you may have a plan for your employee retention rate, and is the actual exceeding the plan? Are you meeting your goal of timely performance appraisals? Things like that. And some of the decisions would be, should you hire an on-site medical staff? How would that affect healthcare costs? So you would need to be able to look at healthcare costs, and that's all about management accounting. I serve on a budget committee for Seton Hall where we deal with management accounting, and what we actually do, Seton Hall creates a massive budget. It's really a full-time job for several employees to manage this budget, and managers all over the university coordinate to create it. And it plans everything from the number of workers, the number of professors, the number of administrators, all sorts of different activities that are going on. We need to budget for the number of students that we expect to have. That would actually be built into the budget. Student retention rates are built into the budget. So accounting majors rarely plan on going into management accounting. But the reality is that most accounting majors ultimately work in management accounting and not in public accounting. So it's typically here at Seton Hall, about 3/4 of our graduates go into what's called public accounting, where they're working for an accounting firm and doing either audit or taxation work. Most of them will eventually move into managerial accounting and work in managerial accounting environments. There's a certification for management accountants called the CMA, Certified Management Accountant. And this requires an exam and a number of other requirements. The exam consists of Part 1, Financial Planning, Performance and Control. There you see Planning Control. So this would involve both external financial reporting, as public accountants do or financial accountants do, planning, budgeting, and forecasting, performance management, cost management, and internal controls. And then Part 2 is a little more sophisticated and more focused on financial decision making. So things like financial statement analysis, corporate finance, decision analysis, risk management, investment decisions, and professional ethics. Something that a lot of students don't realize is that a lot of students who major in finance actually wind up working in management accounting. And in fact, I have a lot of them come back to me and get a master's in accounting because they're doing so much accounting that they find they can really help. The IMA, the Institute of Management Accountants, actually it doesn't mean Institute of Management Accountants anymore. It's just IMA. They're actually here in New Jersey. We have regular meetings with the IMA here at Seton Hall, and we are engaged with the IMA and the CMA exam. Ethics play an important role in management accounting, and we really can't talk about management accounting without also talking about ethics. And there are two sets of ethical guidelines within the IMA, and that would be what's called ethical behavior and resolving ethical conflicts. Some of the guidelines for ethical behavior, a key one is what's called competence. I'll highlight it. Meaning that you should know what you're doing. I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but the IMA says you should know what you're doing. So what do they mean by that? Recognize and communicate professional limitations that preclude responsible judgment, maintain professional competence, follow the laws, regulations, and standards, and provide accurate, clear, concise, and timely decision. What it really means is that you need to know what you're doing. And this is true, of course, for everything that you could possibly do under the sun. You should know what you're doing. You should be competent. And if you're not competent to do something, you have to learn how to do it. But also you have to sometimes recognize when you're out of your league and ask for help, or simply say, I can't do this because I don't know enough about it, and I suggest that you have so-and-so do it instead. So competence is very important as an aspect of ethical behavior. Another guideline that's very important in the IMA standards is what's called confidentiality. In general, information should not be disclosed unless you have explicit permission to do it. This may mean a legal obligation to do it, but information itself should not be disclosed to anyone unless you have explicit permission to do so. Sometimes the government says they'll subpoena information, then you have to provide that information. You would never use information in order to gain some kind of illegal or unethical advantage. For example, a management accountant maybe know about some inside information with the company, and they should not use that information for personal advantage. Sometimes it could actually be illegal and people get arrested for using information. And also to ensure that subordinates take the same precautions. A key part of confidentiality, I should add, is computer security and making sure that the computer that you're using uses proper security measures. And the idea of integrity. In a management accounting sense, this means avoiding conflicts of interest and making sure that people who you work with also do not have conflicts of interest. Refraining from conduct that would prejudice your duties, and abstaining from activities that might discredit the profession, like don't steal, things like that. A lot of times management accountants may be involved in a decision-making process, and that may actually affect their ability to report information. If so, they have a responsibility to report that, and they may have a responsibility to step down, and not necessarily step down, but to step back and not be involved in that process. The IMA also provides guidelines for ethical behavior. One of these is called credibility, and this means to provide information fairly and objectively. If there are delays or deficiencies in timeliness processing, to disclose these, and also to disclose relevant information that would affect people's decisions. In other words, to provide information in a truly ethical way, one must consider what people are doing with the information and take that into account, so that everything that's relevant that people need to make a decision, they have the proper information. A fear here is that the accountant could leave something out that would be important, or that people could be expecting information from an accountant and it's actually not coming when it should be coming. Employers generally have policies, and these should be followed all of the time. Or if they're not followed, then that creates an ethical conflict. Sometimes a policy may itself be unethical, and then that also creates an ethical conflict. What do you do about an ethical conflict? You discuss the conflict with your supervisor or the next highest uninvolved managerial level. So oftentimes you need to go to the right person. And this is usually whoever you work for, and it may be very difficult because they disagree with you, but sometimes it has to be done, and you need to just sit down with your boss and say, you've asked me to do this, but I have a problem with this, and let's talk about how we would go about doing that. And that the importance of discussion is extremely important. There may be situations where you need to go to the level above your supervisor And usually you should do that with your supervisor's knowledge. Or do that with your supervisor themselves and say, okay, I don't agree with you about this. Let's speak to the board, or let's speak to the president of the company, whoever that is. Let's have a meeting and let's discuss how this would be done. Well, it's very, very rare that communication with individuals outside the organization about these conflicts would be appropriate. Sometimes it's legally required and you would need to do it. Sometimes the company will agree that they need to bring certain experts in to help. But one generally should not bring in unemployed people who are not part of the company, bring them into the problem. Because oftentimes what could happen is that confidential information that needs to stay within the company could be released without authorization. You need to focus on the ethical issues at hand. There's an IMA ethics counseling service, or you may need to talk to an attorney regarding your legal responsibilities. So ethics play a very important role in managerial accounting. And information itself, managerial accountants are responsible for a large amount of the information with the company, and they need to make sure that that information is reliable and it's going to be used properly. Without these standards, things tend to fall apart because people rely on having quality information. And if they don't have quality information to make decisions for whatever reason, perhaps to make other people look good or things like that, then that affects the decisions that managers are making, and it could really hurt how a company runs. It's very, very common, unfortunately, when accurate information is not reported, and that leads to all sorts of terrible outcomes for companies. That said, management accountants play a key role in strategic management. Companies need to develop strategies, of course, to attract customers, distinguish themselves from competitors, to establish how that company is going to make money and how it's going to grow and thrive. And management accounting is needed in order to back up that game plan and to show how it's going to work. These are some possible ways that companies create value, different strategies that they may use. One is called a customer intimacy strategy, and that would be looking carefully at customer needs and trying to satisfy their needs. Another approach would be what's called operational excellence, and this would be to deliver products and services faster, more conveniently, at lower prices, perhaps at higher quality, and so on. And again, you need management accounting to do this. Product leadership is to have the highest quality products. By the way, operational excellence is kind of like Samsung or Huawei, I think is the name of the company. Product leadership would be Apple, of course. So management accounting, you need information in order to execute these strategies successfully. Another key aspect of a company's activities is what's called enterprise risk management. Companies take all kinds of risks, and risk managers, right up to what's sometimes called a chief risk officer, need to identify those risks, quantify them, sometimes reduce them, and manage them. So management accountants, again, play a key role in doing this. The company would look for risks and look for ways to reduce the risks. I'd create controls over those risks and find new ways to manage these risks. So let's look at some possible business risks, how to control them, and think about how management accountants play key roles in doing this. For example, products harming customers. One control over that would be to develop a formal and rigorous new product testing program. That would require management accounting because you need to identify how much this program is going to cost and ultimately how it's going to save the company money. Losing market share due to unforeseen actions of competitors. Develop an approach for legally gathering information about competitors' plans and practices. Poor weather conditions. Develop contingency plans for overcoming weather-related disruptions. And again, if you're going to develop a contingency plan, that contingency plan is going to cost you something. Website malfunction. Develop new tests for a website before it goes live. Supplier strike, and create relationships with your suppliers so that to assure that you're going to have the raw materials you need. And if one company can't provide you with those raw materials, find another. Financial statements unfairly reporting the value of inventory. Make sure inventory is accurately counted. And accessing unauthorized information would be to have a quality information system, information security, with proper password protections. Corporate social responsibility is another area where management accounting plays a key role. And this is the idea that a company is taking into consideration all of its stakeholders when it's making decisions. What's the opposite of that? When you only consider your stockholders. Only considering your stockholders would say, hey, our first priority is to make money for our stockholders and forget everybody else. A corporate social responsibility approach says that if we take into consideration the needs of all of our stakeholders, we'll make better decisions, and ultimately that will be better for our stockholders too. So that means managing these relationships with customers, employees, suppliers, the community, environmental rights advocates, and so on, and of course your stockholders. And this means doing more than just what's legal, really doing what's in everyone's best interests. So, for example, from a customer perspective, you want to provide customers with safe, high-quality products that are fairly priced, competent, courteous, rapid delivery of products and services, full disclosure of product-related risks, and easy-to-use information systems for shopping and tracking orders. These are all things that management accountants are going to play a role in. Your relationship with your suppliers, fair contract terms, reasonable time to prepare orders, hassle-free acceptance, and cooperative rather than unilateral actions. What that means is that we work with our suppliers rather than just telling them what to do. I'm going to do stockholders last. I'm going to look at employees. You should have safe and humane working conditions for your employees, non-discriminant treatment of your employees, fair compensation, and opportunities for training, promotion, and personal development. The thinking here is that if your employees benefit, then the company will benefit too. What should you do for your community? Pay your taxes, provide honest information about planned closings, provide resources to support community institutions like charities, schools, and civic activities, and keep reasonable access to media sources. Environmental and human rights advocates, greenhouse gas emissions, recycling, resource conservation, child labor transparency, and full disclosure of suppliers located in developing countries. The concern there is that companies often use suppliers who may be using unethical methods to produce goods. And stockholders own your company. So I'm putting this in bold because in a way, they're kind of in charge. This is their company. You should provide them with competence, accurate information, and full information about the risks that are inherent in your business so that they're able to make good judgments about investing in your company. Now, another perspective on management, and really managers need to know all of this, is to have a to understand the business process involves a series of steps that create value for your customers and in turn will create value for you. And they call this the value chain. It starts with R&D, where you expend money on research and development to create quality products. You spend money on product design, manufacture goods that your customers are going to want, quality marketing and distribution, and then after your customers buy products, good customer service. And all of these functions are key. If something in here fails, that may mean that you're not producing things and delivering them to customers the way you really want to. You gotta love these graphics. So lean production is the idea that you produce as much as you possibly can with as little resources, that is inventory, and as quickly as possible. And the idea is that if you do it this way, you can produce much more using less. This was revolutionized by, among other companies, Amazon and Dell Computer. So the way traditional production would work is that you would make a lot of computers, sell them to stores, and they sit on the shelf and wait for customers to buy them. And hopefully customers will eventually buy them all. The way lean production would work is that the customer orders the computer, the company takes down the order, determines what components are needed, orders the components immediately, puts the computer together, and ships them to the customer. So this way, goods, rather than waiting for the customer orders the goods are produced almost immediately and shipped off to the customer. And what this allows you to do is it allows you to satisfy your customers using very little inventory and much fewer resources than a traditional production environment. Here's a picture of what traditional manufacturing looks like. You make the goods, you store the inventories in a big warehouse, and wait for customers to come buy them. So lean production means that you just produce what you need, in other words, what your customers want, and you don't produce anything extra. You don't get stuck with any extra inventory. And this results in fewer defects, less wasted effort, rarely overproducing goods that need to be liquidated and sold at discount prices, and overall producing more with less. So lean production is a management philosophy that can be supported using management accounting. We'll be talking more about it throughout the class. Another approach to management that we'll be talking about, and this is really focused more on management accounting than management itself, is what's called the theory of constraints. And the idea is that when you're managing a process, you focus on the constraints or bottlenecks in the system and opening up those bottlenecks. The way to think about a factory, for example, is like a parkway or a highway. It's New Jersey, so we can say like a parkway, like a turnpike, okay? So if you think about it as something like the parkway, then, and you're managing, you want traffic to move quickly through the parkway, naturally what you would do is you would focus on wherever traffic is slowing down and wherever something might be blocking traffic. And you would go there and you would send your police cars there and you would have them move the cars off the road so that traffic can keep on moving, and focus on wherever the bottlenecks are. And you would probably say, well, why wouldn't you always do that? The theory of constraints creates a mathematical system for doing that, really focusing on what your bottleneck is and then trying to get as much through that bottleneck. Of course, you want to clear the bottleneck, but you can't always clear it. So trying to get as much as you can through that bottleneck in order to maximize your profits. That's a production line of, I guess, beer. So what you would do is you'd identify the weakest link in the chain, so to speak, and you'd focus on that weakest link so that you're maximizing the amount of production that you can squeeze through that weakest link. And eventually what you would want to do is you'd want to open up that constraint so that more goods can move through it, and then find the next bottleneck and then focus on that bottleneck and maximizing it. So management entails all sorts of different things, and therefore management accountants also need to be involved in a lot of different things. A good manager is going to complement, is going to have an understanding of strategies, risks, business processes, and know how to use data in order to solve problems. And what you need to do is you need to identify what you're trying to measure and how to use data in order to solve your problem. And that's a tremendous challenge, of course. It's easy to say it, but it's not so difficult to do in the real world. And one thing which you would want to do is some of the skills that you would need is to try to determine where your profitability should be and how you would achieve that profitability and what you need to do to keep a good relationship with your shareholders. Also, how to keep a good relationship with your customers. What are your customers' expectations? And what kind of data do you have about your customers in order to make better decisions? Focus on cash flow and having the amount of cash flow that you need in order to sustain your operations and do all the other things that you want to do. So what we're going to be doing here is, the way the book puts it, is measurement skills, but we'll be really focusing on developing the type of information and using management accounting information in order to make decisions. And again, this revolves around this cycle of planning, controlling, and decision making. Planning, trying to decide what you're going to do and putting that out in a plan, and that's called forecasting and budgeting. Controlling would be comparing the plan to the actual to see how what you've done compares with what you plan to do, and that's how you learn new things. And decision making, using all this information in order to make better decisions and better achieve your goals. And all of this is about leadership, of course. And the book identifies 6 skills of an effective leader. I don't know if I would quite put leadership this way, but I always tell people, if they're interested in leadership, to focus on that. I think the real Bible of leadership, besides the Bible itself, is 7 Habits of Highly Effective. I don't know where that came from. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Anyway, here's 6 skills of an effective leader. If you want 7 habits, then you got to go to 7 habits. Technical competence. You have to be really good at what you do. High integrity. The way I think about integrity is that what you think and what you say and what you do are the same thing. It's very hard to do. So in other words, you're honest about what you say reflects what you actually think. And when you say something, you do it. And when you think you want to do something, you actually accomplish it. So again, the way I think about it is thought, speech, and action. And that these things are all in sync and together. Understand how to implement organizational change. Very difficult change management. Communication skills. Capable of motivating and mentoring other people. You need to have the ability to help other people, to motivate them to accomplish not only what you want them to accomplish, but what they personally need to accomplish. And to be able to work with teams and manage their decision processes so that teams are able to move forward and accomplish what they want to accomplish. So again, this is chapter 1 of the book of Noreen Brewer Garrison. And I hope this helped you understand managerial accounting. Introduction to Managerial Accounting.